A title, Role and Benefits of a Facility Dog to Support Victims and Witnesses. A disclaimer. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Justice. This project was supported by the U.S. Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative and the Office on Violence Against Women. Portions of this program are protected by copyright. If you would like to copy, display in a public setting, adapt, or distribute this program, please contact elder.justice@usdoj.gov. Paige Ulrey, Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney, Seattle, Washington, sits with a dog resting its chin on her lap.
A facility dog is a dog that works in a place rather than for a particular person. So Ellie's job is to work in our office and help victims through the court process.
And what kind of help would she give someone in a court process?
So she will sit with victims who usually are vulnerable in some way, either kids or people with developmental disabilities or elders, but sometimes people who don't have any particular disability. And she sits with them when they testify or if they have to speak at sentencing or going through a defense attorney interview. Whatever the need is, we help victims by having her there with them if they would like her to be.
Do you have to get special permission to do that? I mean, could anyone ask for a dog to sit next to them in court, or is there certain kinds of cases or certain criteria that have to be met before that's permitted?
Well, Ellie started out as the first dog to be doing this formally in the country, as far as I'm aware. And when we first started using her, we got some objections, and the judges tended to dismiss them. And so we started using her pretty regularly without any problems. And then I prosecuted a case involving a man with a developmental disability who was very much in fear of the defendant. And Ellie sat with him during the defense interview, during many meetings with me, and then during the trial itself. And after the defendant was convicted, the defendant appealed the conviction based on Ellie's presence there with the victim. And essentially what they argued was that Ellie's presence with the victim created a sympathy for the victim that wasn't fair to the defendant. And so they asked that the case be overturned on that grounds.
And what was the result of the appeal?
It went up to the Court of Appeals in Washington, and the conviction was affirmed, and then it went to the state Supreme Court, and it was also affirmed there. So Ellie is mentioned in the state Supreme Court decision and basically is a little groundbreaker. And because of her, we have the ability now, when we can show that the victim is in particular need of comfort or assistance, to use her in the courtroom or use any facility dog in the courtroom with the victim. I think victims and advocates alike tend to be really grateful for her. We have an interviewer who interviews victims of sexual and physical abuse and also some victims with dementia or developmental disabilities. And she routinely uses Ellie because she's so grateful for how much more easily people can talk when Ellie's there with them. Like me here talking with you. But she really generally just makes people feel more comfortable and relaxed. And we've had victims who have asked if they could come back to our office after they had an interview using Ellie because they liked hanging around with her so much. It's really important that these dogs be incredibly well behaved, because if you have a dog that is acting out at all, it really could ruin our ability to use them routinely in court.
What's the impact of Ellie or dogs like Ellie on elder abuse cases, supporting elder abuse victims, and so on?
It's interesting with elders. It's been a little bit different to work with older victims than it has with children or even people with developmental disabilities. I think some older victims might feel like it's a little bit embarrassing to have a dog. So what I've seen with a lot of those victims who are a little bit hesitant to use Ellie in court is that they're very welcome. They welcome her when I bring her to interviews or when I go see them at their homes, but they may not necessarily want her in the courtroom with them as well. It just depends on the person. But I have had a few cases of older victims, especially people with dementia, where those victims have absolutely loved having her around and have found the whole experience to be much less traumatic when Ellie was there with them.
So you actually take Ellie not just to the courtroom, but perhaps to someone's home or facility?
Yes, I've taken her to facilities, I've taken her to victims' homes, and it's generally just made the whole experience better for everybody. You know, she gives us something to talk about besides the victimization. She gives the victim, I think, the experience that we are human beings and we're there for them, not just out to get a conviction, and I think that helps us in the end.
Is there any advice or suggestions you would give to prosecutors that might be interested in building a program such as this where facility dog is utilized in court?
I think their website is cci.org.
A logo, Canine Companions for Independence, cci.org.
And you can check out there what the different options are. But basically, you write them and you apply for the dog. You then get interviewed in person by them. And if you sort of pass their criterion, then you get placed on a waiting list to get a dog.
Logos appear. NCAL, www.ncall.us. Terra Nova Films, terranova.org. Funded by the U.S. Department of Justice Elder Abuse Initiative and the Office on Violence Against Women, www.justice.gov/elderjustice.